Well, way back in the early 80s, a friend took me to the Con in Melbourne to listen to a masterclass that was given by a famous English pianist who specialised in Ravel. I had no idea what a masterclass was, and I was worried that I wasn't going to understand it. I thought that the pianist would communicate with the students in frighteningly technical language that would exclude me, like the sort of stuff Glenn Gould used to write on the covers of his records that I loved so much, but I couldn't understand anything that he wrote, all about modulations and other things that were a complete mystery to me. But to my astonishment, at the Con masterclass, this pianist expressed himself almost completely in the language of ordinary life on earth. And I sat there spellbound for hours. I was completely absorbed and blissed out. But it wasn't simply because the pianist's teaching illuminated the music for me, although of course it did that, but it was because what he was saying applied in some fabulously enlightening way to what I do when I write. For the first time, I felt the connection between art forms in a real and thrilling way. And that's one of the many strands of this excellent memoir of Anna Goldsworthy's piano lessons. I'm very happy to have been asked to launch it here tonight in my erstwhile college. And I'd like to congratulate Anna very, very warmly on this extraordinary achievement, and black ink for the handsomeness of the book as a physical object. And I know it's going to find a large and ecstatic readership. When Anna's publisher, Chris Fike, and I sat down one evening over a martini down at the Gin Palace, and he told me that Anna Goldsworthy was writing a memoir, I knew I was going to love it, and I couldn't wait for her to finish it. And I knew it would be brilliant because I'd read a piece that she published in the Monthly magazine about music competitions. From reading that, I saw that as a writer she had serious guts, that as well as the triumphant and the glorious, she was prepared to articulate in an unflinching way the uncomfortable and the unflattering about other people and about herself. This refusal to be sentimental, of course, is rarer and much harder than people think. It also opens up a vein of sly comedy. Within the first couple of pages of this book, we are shown little Anna, little girl, in Adelaide as she was at the age of 9. An intellectually precocious, rather nerdy pain in the arse, to put it crudely, who lived in a world of narcissistic fantasy. Do you think I'll ever be able to sing like that? I asked my mother on the way home with a false, preening modesty. Later, finding herself with several older girl piano students who have received a B and a C in grade 3 exams, this child actually has the hide to compliment them from the lofty heights of grade 4 on what she calls their commendable effort. I found this toughness about her younger self not only hilarious, but a guarantee of integrity. And indeed, in this book, she never lets us down. She's not only a very brave writer, but she's a psychologically sophisticated one. She nails without mercy people who gush with a phony love of music. She gives us a dryly complex portrait of her parents, these hugely powerful yet graciously blurred figures in the background of her struggles. She plainly loves and respects them very, very deeply, but she doesn't scruple to sink a delicate knife between her father's ribs in her accounts of 2 notable incidents, which I won't go into here, but they're very enjoyably told with great subtlety. Nor does she shrink from showing the bossiness of the men in her family. It comes across as a very bracing bossiness, a highly educated, cultured and extremely encouraging bossiness, but I think it's bossiness nonetheless, although she never uses the word. She writes wonderfully well about how appalling and embarrassing your parents and your love for your parents can be when you're an adolescent, and yet how bottomlessly crucial they are to your grip on life and to your sense of yourself in the world. This book, it's a deeply engaging book, and it doesn't shrink from contemplating the many bizarre and often even crazed stages that a young musician like Anna, in her embarrassing lolly pink overalls, has to toil through in order to grow up and get to where she is today as a mature woman and a mature musician. It's first and foremost a book about a wonderful teacher, a celestial teacher. I've never read a deeper account of the teaching and learning relationship. Mrs. Sivan is immortalised here in these pages. She's already immortal, of course. Her spirit will live on in what she has taught and in what her students will manifest and what they will pass on down the line. But in Anna's book, Mrs. Sivan's way of speaking has been rendered in such a way that it fills the reader too with energy and hopefulness. I was enthralled by her brilliant stream of talk, the extraordinary imagery she draws on, her profound understanding of the music she plays and teaches, of its provenance and its meaning, and what each composer has brought out of his own life and suffering and offered to the world. Anna has recreated this in language that delivers repeated jolts of a kind of ecstasy. I can't remember when I last read a book about music that flashed through me on such electrical currents of pleasure. Rereading it today before the launch, I had the pencil in my hand and I found myself copying down great tracts of Mrs. Sivan's speech. If I started quoting, we'd be here all night. Her every utterance shines with hilarious and beautiful wisdom about how to be alive in the world. It's an honour to be here tonight in her presence. I don't know how many things Anna is a natural at. I think there's an awful lot of them. But one of them is how to keep a piece of writing moving forward. The impetus of the book is remarkable. There's not a dead spot in it. It surges forward in leaps and bounds, carrying its freight of seriousness with an exemplary lightness. And I love her self-deflating strokes. After a failure in Sydney, she writes this: I rushed from the room disgusted with myself and climbed the steps to the top of the Opera House, where I assumed a tragic, windswept pose. Oh, to have the simple, honest life of a fairy. The book is packed with gorgeous writing about music. She writes about music as a way of breathing. Once, just before a performance, she's involved in a car crash and she plays all covered in bruises. And she writes this: I had been initiated into a darker, parallel reality, and in the Chopin Nocturne, I let myself go there, bringing it to the quietest place I could find inside me, and I felt the audience come too. What she writes about audiences will change forever the way I think while I'm sitting in a concert hall. She makes me understand why nothing can happen without us, the audience. How terrifyingly deep is our need for music and for what it can do to both performer and listener. A honey-coloured warmth pours up from the audience, she says. She talks about the extra voltage that the presence of listeners brings to her playing. On another less happy occasion, when she's played badly, she writes that the other students applauded, merciless in their pity. She talks about the audience leaning in with its great bruising need. And there's a lovely description of an ovation and its effects. There was such plaintiveness in that call, in its acknowledgement of sated need. We stood to meet it, buffeted as though by a wind. So as you can see, Piano Lessons is a very rich book. I've read it twice now and I haven't come close to exhausting what it has to offer. Whenever I think of it though, the first memory that comes to my mind is a very simple and very pure one, something very fundamental, and this is the note that I'd like to end on. It's the way Mrs. Sivan, after the child Anna has humiliated herself at the piano, takes her hand and says, "My darling, we must sit and work." Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, for such a beautiful appreciation. I'm going to have to try not to start blubbing like Gwyneth Paltrow at the Oscars as I say my thank yous. Helen mentioned this precocious 9-year-old from Adelaide, and it was actually as a precocious 9-year-old from Adelaide that I first encountered Helen Garner and was seduced by her prose. My father took my brother and myself out of school for a day and took us to the Adelaide Writers' Week, where Helen read from a work in progress about a little girl called Poppy and her father. And I remember it was as if a babel fish was in my ear and I could suddenly understand. I'd been used to being surrounded by sort of adult literary mutterings, but even at that age I could sort of respond to the rhythmic vitality of her sentences and the absolute honesty of what she had to say. And that book, of course, was subsequently published as The Children's Spark, which I think I reread so many times as an adolescent that I just about still know it by memory. So it's a great honour, Helen, to have you here today speaking of my book. Thank you very much. This is a little bit like an episode of This Is Your Life for me. I think everybody I've ever met just about is in this room, with the notable exception of my immediate family from Adelaide. But please don't read too much significance into that. I think they like the book. They said they liked the book. Two of them are overseas at the moment. Another one is very pregnant, and another one tonight has the premiere of a movie that's based on one of his short stories. So I'll let you work out which one is which. But I do feel absolutely delighted to have so many people here from so many different parts of my life. You know, I see people from the trio and a wonderful supporting crowd, and from my mother's group, from my book club, my beloved students, my colleagues, my dear friends, and some very special visitors from Adelaide also. They include Gabriella Smart and Deborah Andriacchio, both who feature in the book in cameo roles. And of course, Eleanor and Isaac Sivan, really delighted to have them both here with me today. Also, my dear friend Katrina Germain surprised me with their presence, so it's a thrill to have you all here. Thank you. I think one of the privileges of being a musician, and I don't imagine this is unique to musicians, but it's certainly a very large part of it, is the existence in your life of these mentor figures. And my life has really been blessed with mentors. This book predates my relationship with Ronald Farron Price, who's been a very inspiring person for me in recent years, and also my acquaintanceship with Stephen McIntyre, who's been a really lovely avuncular figure living next door and giving me much advice about the industry. But as you know, what it does dwell on is a person who's been an absolutely incandescent presence in my life, a beacon since childhood, and that of course is Eleanor Sivan, without whom I can confidently say I would not be a pianist. The book is called Piano Lessons, but the lessons in the book extend, I think, well beyond the piano, and certainly I'd hope to other artistic pursuits, but also to life at large. I sort of think of the book more as a book of life lessons, and these are lessons that were imparted to me by Eleonora, and by her teaching and her example, and also by immersion in the worlds of these great composers. And the lessons that I'm speaking about are lessons of joy, of humility, of wonder, of love, of generosity, and certainly of gratitude. And it's gratitude that I felt overwhelmingly, really, as I was writing this book and also here tonight. In fact, I prepared a page of acknowledgements that sort of threatened to become a second book. And then I started to wonder whether perhaps there was something a little immodest about that somehow, if I was saying that this book is such a magnificent epic that it required a village to raise it. And I was reminded actually of a colleague of mine who got up after winning a competition and said, "I'd like to thank two women, my mother and my teacher, for making me the amazing person I am today." So without making any such claims for myself or for my book, I would like to say thank you to a few more people here, besides, of course, Eleonora. One is Damien Powell for providing such a terrific environment for me to live in, for us to live in here at Janet Clarke Hall, and the vision of setting up the Artist in Residence program. And I hope you will be happy with this as one result of that program. And Ian Morrison for supporting that program also. Also to Donna Davies at Janet Clarke Hall for her support, and for all my friends here, students and fellow members of the Senior Common Room alike. Now, it's not entirely coincidental that JCH has this connection with Black Ink, because it was actually here a few years ago that I first met Chris Fike, just in the passage around the corner there, and over the course of a very short conversation, I think I managed to make about 50 faux pas, a spectacular number at any rate, and I think a personal record. But nonetheless, he forgave me sufficiently to encourage me to write for the monthly. And then a couple of years ago on my birthday, I received an email from him saying, "Would you like to write a book, a memoir?" And I think he might even have said, maybe called Piano Lessons. So I can't even take credit for the idea of this book. And originally I thought, a memoir, a memoir. How presumptuous, I'm just starting out in my career, I can't really do that. But as I thought about it a little, it occurred to me that it would be a great way for me to clarify some of my own thoughts about music and the piano and its role in my life, also my relationship with Eleonora, and also it offered me a wonderful opportunity of honouring Eleonora and of disseminating some of her teaching. So I said to Chris, I will need deadlines, and he said, you have to supply me with a chapter every month. And I did that for a little while, and then my other vocations got in the way, which are playing the piano and tending to email. And I soon found that I was coming up with many excuses along the lines of the dog ate my homework. I was in a car accident with my trio and I broke my back. And then even worse, I'm about to have a baby. But Chris was wonderfully patient, and only at the beginning of this year he said, no, you really have to finish that. So I parked myself in the pastoral care room upstairs for a couple of hours every afternoon until my phone rang, and there was Nicholas on the other side, and behind him a baby screaming blue murder, and he said, you're needed, and that chapter would hastily come to an end. I'd also like to thank my dear friend Claire Forster, who is a former housemate of mine, who then morphed into a literary agent, and then even more blessedly morphed into my literary agent, and has been a wonderfully shrewd as well as graceful guide for me through this industry. There are two other gentlemen I'd like to thank. One of them has been forcibly removed from this room because of heckling, and that of course is my son Reuben Purcell. So he's been wonderfully patient with his mummy, traipsing around the country and writing and doing many other things, and has generally maintained a terrific cheer about it. But I'd especially like to thank his father, Nicholas Purcell, who read every word of this book, I think, about 100 times, and many other words that are no longer in this book, and gave me a lot of wise counsel about the book, about the content of the book, about dealing with my anxieties pre-publication, and cooked meals for me, and raised my son with the help of two of his remarkable relatives, Mary and Alberta, and has just been is really my secret collaborator in all things, and I don't think I would have made it to the end of this book without him. So before I really do turn into a sobbing Gwyneth Paltrow, I might turn to someone a little bit more eloquent, and that's Chopin. And that's the Chopin Nocturne number 8. To my mind, this piece is the secret soundtrack of this book. And in the book, I played in a moment of great duress when Eleanor was in hospital and unwell. And at such a moment, 6 years ago now, I could scarcely have imagined a moment such as this, with her restored to us, and with so many loved ones and friends in this room, and with my baby upstairs, and a new book out. So I really feel that my that my life is very rich at this moment, and I'm very, very grateful. Now, Eleanor is actually going to say a few words perhaps after I've played, but I'd like to quote her first, and this is what she said about the Chopin Nocturne. I can change my interpretation 100 times, depends on mood of day, can be hopeful like this, can be nostalgic, can be wise, can be more sustained like this, can have more space here or suddenly more light, more freedom, younger even. Tonight I'd like to play it to you all as a thanksgiving for Eleonora, for Reuben, for Nicholas, and for all of you for your support. Thank you.
This book, interesting by itself, beautiful and very, very emotional and very honest book. It's a great story. It's Anna's personal story, her own example. But what's very important, that it will be give information to think about, to think what is it music itself, what is it music. It's not just language of universal, not just language of any contact. It's language of our presence. It's essential language of our life. And people has to understand that. We need not to teach them playing piano. We need to teach them to breathe. We need to show the emotion and has ability to express them. And I hope this book will bring a lot of people to think about, to do it, to read it, to maybe play more piano, maybe take much more serious or piano lessons. Thank you very much.